talking to Tammy how, excuse me, hectic of a week it was after coming back off of fall break, and how it's just going to get hecticer and hecticer for the rest of the year. That's a good word. You can write that down, Lynn. It's just going to spiral even better for the rest of the year. So, as I mentioned before, we're looking at a dysfunctional family, and we're looking at favoritism. We have all seen at some point a favoritism situation. Some families are just rampant with favoritism. It's been pointed out to me that I have teachers' pets in my classroom, and I can probably own that. But, you know, some folks, it just seems if they have more aligned with your beliefs, and if they are more along with your way of looking at things, you just naturally gravitate towards that person. And it just seems to be easier to get along with people when you see things the same way. So there's a little bit of favoritism, I think, that's inherent in all of us. Can you tell the fall is here? My nose is just going crazy. But quit beating that baby's head on the bench, Mama. So that was a good one. So we start out looking in Genesis. Genesis 15, the Lord reaffirmed His commitment to Abram in a covenant-making procedure. Then in chapter 17, the Lord changed Abram's name to Abraham, and initiated circumcision as a sign of their covenant. 90 years old, Sarah gave birth to Isaac. Chapter 22, we see where Abraham and Isaac went up the mountain for the sacrifice, and that's where Abraham said, the Lord will provide. So now we see how in chapter 24, leading up to this, we're about to get into the lesson, is where Isaac and Rebekah were married and started on this journey now of the patriarchs. Now we're in chapter 25, and right before this scripture, the Bible talks about how Rebekah had such a time. This was not an easy pregnancy for her. She had asked God, why am I even here? You know, if this is what it's about, why am I here? I don't want to do this any longer. It just was not easy time for her. Let's see if I can find. The children struggled together within her to the point that she was questioning her ability to even survive. She wasn't even sure she was going to make it. So when she was delivered, and remember, she's 60 years old now, she's my age, trying to have a baby, and it was not easy for her. Esau was born first, and then right on his heels, literally, Jacob had grabbed hold of his heel. And, you know, this internal fight was ongoing. Verse 24 of chapter 25 says, when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red all over, like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. Now, in my mind, I'm seeing a red furry baby, and you know, I've seen children born that have full head of hair, and some, like my baby, had like sprigs of hair. But the Bible talks about Esau being hairy all over like a garment. So this was a furry little baby. And as we're told, he stayed hairy his whole life. Now Jacob, on the other hand, verse 26 says, and after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel. His name was called Jacob. Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. So Isaac was 60 years old, and here she's trying to have these babies. What a time, right? We're already into a point of later years starting a family. So I can't imagine starting a family right now. But there they go. Now it goes on to say, as the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So there's a lot of stuff that you can kind of unpack there. Esau being the firstborn son, in the mindset of those days, even though they were twins, not identical twins, I'm sure, because I'm positive of that, but because Esau was firstborn, he had the position of prominence. He was the firstborn son, even though literally his brother had a hold of his heel. So, it was just a struggle all the way through. Jacob was competitive even when defeat was already done. He was still being competitive. And I think that's something that he never lost. He was always a competitive, cunning, kind of a manipulative fella. They were not identical twins, like I said, because one was real furry, and the other, it goes on to say, was smooth. Jacob identified himself as smooth. So we're looking here at Esau. He's the hunter. It says here in verse 27. Come on in, guys. Esau was a cunning hunter. Now, it has been suggested in some of the commentaries that during this time period in that area of the world, there was a great forest over there. There was vegetation. There was all kinds of areas to go out and hunt in the woods. And that being the case, Esau being a great hunter, not bad. I'm sure there was plenty of game, although it wasn't guaranteed that every time you go hunting, you catch something. As the hunters or the hunters' wives in here can attest to, just because you go to the field don't mean you're coming back with a deer. Any more than just because you go to the lake don't mean you're coming back with a fish. But he was good at it, and he perfected himself out there as a hunter. Now, Esau immersed himself in that lifestyle. He was an outdoorsman. He stayed out more than he was in. He would go out, I can imagine going out for weeks at a time and just hunting and just going out and doing whatever he wanted to do because, hey, I'm alone in the woods. I'll go over here and I'll build me a little shelter over here. I'll go over here and build a little shelter over here. Maybe I'll drop into this town over here and check things out, see what's going on over there. I think he had a very open mind to a lot of things. I believe Esau had a lack of I just don't think Esau, and I can back this up by his actions, I don't think he really cared much about what God thought about things. Amen. I think he had this idea that I am the great white hunter, I am going out here and I'm going to do things that I want to do. So he did. And I'm sure he saw himself as alpha male, very dominant. I can go out here and hunt and kill things. I have dominion over this world. I am stepping up. I'm the man. Come fight me and find out. I think he was I won't call him a brute, but I think that he had brutish tendencies. I think he was very self-centered and very focused on being a manly man and just being outdoors. And I think his appearance lent to that. I think he was, like the Bible already said, he was a very hairy fella. He was out there. He'd gone wild, if you will. Back to nature in every sense of the word. And I could see how his dad being the more timid man, Isaac, the one who was very passive, not weak, but timid, meek is the word I'm after, and he was able to keep the peace around in the area. If you'll remember the stories, Isaac had dug a well, and some folks around decided that, hey, that's a pretty good well, I think I want it. And so rather than fight them, he said, okay, you can have it. And he went over here and dug a well. And then somebody said, hey, I think I want that well too. And he said, okay, you can have it too, and I'll just move over here and dig another well. And it was more to keep the peace in the region than it was to be weak and scared off. He just sometimes you just don't want to fight. Sometimes it's easier just to say, you know what, take it, I'll go over here. In fact, didn't Abraham and Lot have that same arrangement, where it was more important for Abraham to say, hey, it's more important that my family survive. I didn't turn mine off either. It's more important that my family survive than me be the winner. So I will let you win, Lot, and I will go over here. I think listen at me. I think Isaac probably heard that story from his dad about how, hey, you know, me and your Uncle Lot, we were having a time, so we just kind of split and went our separate ways, and God took care of me. You know, I'm sure that Abraham had taught Isaac all these things, and he was just kind of willing to move. And I can see now how Jacob had also heard from his daddy, hey, this is what I've done. We moved. We didn't fight for the wells. We just, keep the peace. And I think he caught that. But all that being said, I think that Isaac sort of wished that he was Esau in a way, going out and doing all these manly man things, not having to be the boss of the family, not having to be the patriarch. If I could just go out and hunt for a couple of weeks, just leave all the responsibilities behind and just go out and be one with nature. So maybe he was having kind of a living his life vicariously through his son. But the Bible does say that he loved him. He loved Esau. Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison. So, he not only did he love him, he participated in all this stuff. He built him up. It wouldn't surprise me that there was a place for the trophies or something like that. I don't know. But he was very proud of his son Esau, and he showed it. And there was no doubt that he showed it. He ate of the venison. He participated in Esau's life. But Rebekah, verse 28 says, loved Jacob. But, now that word there, a lot of times in the Bible, has a whole lot bigger meaning than we attribute to the word in our English language. It's a contrast. You would say there, in contrast to Isaac, Rebekah loved Jacob. And it kind of infers that Rebekah was all over Jacob's lifestyle. It infers that Rebekah built up the younger, the Jacob. Now, as if you remember back when Rebekah was having all this trouble in her pregnancy, she had called out to God and she had sought God. She had went to a man I don't know if you call him a priest or not, but she sought out the Lord, is what the Bible says. So whether that means she prayed to God and he heard, or whether she sought out a man of God and he told her, God responded to Rebekah and told her that the youngest would rule over the oldest. And I don't doubt that at some point during the lifetime, Rebekah had told old Isaac, hey, God told me that the younger was going to rule over the older. So I'm sure there was a little bit of stuff going on. I mean, it's obvious there was stuff going on in this family. The rivalry is palatable. I'm sure you could feel it. I'm sure that when Esau, I can see Esau come carrying in whatever it was that he had killed that day, and he look over here at Jacob in the fields with the sheep, or in the garden, or however it was, wherever he was. It's like, hey, little man, how you doing today? Look, I got me a big old deer on my shoulder. Yeah, it's a cute little lamb you got over there. How'd you sleep in the tent last night? Pretty good? Yeah, the stars were beautiful. I loved it outside. Yeah. Oh, I had to fight off a bear. What did you do? Oh, yeah, you had a toenail. So, I can see the sibling rivalry just kind of going crazy here. Jacob, on the other hand, he was kind of calm. He was a planner. He was not the type of individual that would leave it to chance. A lot of the commentators I read said that Esau was just kind of a laissez-faire. He said, I'm going to go out in the woods. Well, what are you going to do? I don't know. I'm just going in the woods. You going to hunt? I don't know. I might. What are you going to eat? Whatever I can find. And he just didn't care. It was just a living in the moment kind of a thing. And he didn't have a plan for his life. And the plan, the seemingly set plan of, hey, there's Abraham, Isaac, Esau, you're supposed to be next. So, you've got this whole promise. Got to get going on God's promise here. All the stars in the sky, all the sand and all the dirt on the ground. We got to be a people of that many population. So, Esau didn't care. He was going out and having fun and doing what he wanted to do. Jacob planned it out. You can't be a good farmer. You can't be a mediocre farmer without planning it out. You have to sort of figure things out. You got to have to think ahead a little bit. You can't eat all of that corn on the cob, because some of it you got to let ripen to plant next time. You can't pick every bean because you won't have any for next year. You can't let just whatever happens with the animals. You got to plan. You got to look out for the future. You got to think 3 months ahead and then 3 years ahead. Not just 3 minutes from now there's going to be a deer come through. So they were very different personalities. And Mama and Daddy fed into that. So about this time, some commentators have said that Dad, Isaac, was 80 years old. Sarah, listen at me. These names and me today just are not getting along, are they? Rebecca, like I said, was 60. And so, they were not spring chickens. They had lived long enough to know better than to do what they were doing, too. You think as we get older, we're supposed to get just a little bit wiser. We're supposed to be able to control our emotions just a little bit better than I could when I was 19 years old. We're supposed to be able to use our mind a little bit more and think things through before we just act impulsively and do stupid stuff. Doesn't always work that way, though, does it? So, Mama was pleased. Mama was pleased with the constant security that Jacob offered her. I got food. We've got all kinds of sheep. We've got all kinds of livestock. We've got crops. It's a good life. I'm pretty good. This is kind of a content. I'm content. So as we look on through there, we're going to skip a few chapters now. We're going to skip 26 and pick up in 27. And this is picking up after, if you'll remember the story about Esau coming in from the field one day, or coming in from the hunt, hadn't caught anything, he was hungry. Jacob had made some stew, had made some food, and Esau said, feed me, and Jacob said, I'll feed you if you give me your birthright. And Esau said, fine, take it, I just want some food. And there the deed was done there. So it kind of goes to show you that Esau he either didn't think about it, he didn't care, or he thought that, well, it doesn't matter what I say in our privacy, I can deny it. He said, she said, I still get the birthright, It's a set in stone kind of thing. So, on about 40 years later, I think is kind of where we're at now. So, commentators have placed Jacob and Esau anywhere from 80 to 100 years old now. These guys, these are old men now, okay? And now Isaac, over 100 years old, and he don't know how long he's going to live, but he can't see anymore. He can't get around anymore. He's broke and he's blind, and he's continuing to live through Esau's adventures. I'm sure he looks forward to Esau coming in and telling him the great story of the hunt. But he told Esau, he said, tell you what, go out and catch me a venison, bring it back and prepare it for me the way that I like it, and I'm going to bless you before I die. So I don't know, maybe he was thinking in his mind, I'm confident that he was not sick. I'm confident that he was not on death's door. But I think it was just one of those things where I want to get this done before I die. And I'm going to pass along a blessing to you. So you bring me something to eat and let's do this. Now notice what did not happen. This was the blessing of the father passing the right of patriarchy onto the eldest son. This was not something that should have been done in private. This is not something that you should have to sneak around and say, hey, come here. Here's the plan. Go get me a critter, bring it in, we'll have us a little feast here, just you and me. I'll give you the blessing. It's all said and done. Rebecca doesn't have to know anything about it. Just don't tell your mother. Bible doesn't say that, but it's inferred. It's a secret thing. And it shouldn't have been. Isaac knew what he was doing. So, it happened, and Esau goes out to the woods and goes to hunt. In the meantime, Rebekah heard what Isaac had said. So, she sent, that's where we pick up here in chapter 27 on verse 5, and Rebekah heard when Isaac spake to Esau his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt for venison and to bring it. And Rebekah spoke unto Jacob her son, did you see that? Jacob her son, saying, behold, I heard thy father speak to Esau thy brother, saying, bring me venison, make me savory meat, that I may eat. Now bless thee before the Lord before my death. Time out right there. Isaac never said, I will bless you before the Lord. Isaac said, I want to bless you before I die. Rebekah embellished it just a little bit, saying, not only is he going to give your brother his blessing, but he's going to invoke a blessing from God. Maybe I'm reading into it a little bit, but that wasn't what Isaac had said. Verse 7, he goes on to say, bring me venison, make me savory meat, that I may eat, and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, this is Rebekah still talking, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock, fetch me from thence 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, that he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death. Rebekah was a cunning little woman at this point. She knew what her husband was planning, and she wasn't having none of it. Now, you could argue that God had told her that Jacob, the youngest, was going to rule over Esau, the oldest. God had told her that. That was a fact. But Rebekah took it upon herself to fix that. Kind of like when Abram took it upon himself to fix the whole thing about Sarah being too old to have children. It didn't work out really well for them, and it doesn't work out really well for Rebekah either. So Rebekah took action. She figured out in her mind what needed to happen. All that she could see right now was immediate action. a knee-jerk reaction, if you will. It's what we call in the Army. It's like something happens, you kind of jerk that knee up there. So this is what Rebekah did. She said, okay, we're going to make you your brother, and when Dad gives you the blessing, then it's on you. So what? What does it matter who gets the blessing? What does it matter who gets the birthright? Well, as we heard one of our pastors saying, along with the birthright comes a double portion of an inheritance. Along with the birthright, you have the right as the firstborn to be the patriarch of the family. The family business becomes your business. You get to be the patriarch of the family. You get to make the decisions. You get to sit in the big chair. So that was Rebekah's thought process going through here. The fact that they had open favorites is now becoming open hostility towards each other. Now it's becoming not just competitive, now it's almost to the point of combat. Rebekah was so favored, she so favored her pick that she was willing to sacrifice everything for her pick to get the better end of the deal. She was willing to betray her husband, to betray the family, to go against all the traditions that they had. She was willing to throw it all out the door to get this blessing on her son, if you will. Now, like I said, she remembered that God had told her that the youngest would rule over the oldest, and so she was probably justifying her actions by saying, you know, this is what God wants, so I'm just going to fix it for him so he don't have to. Kind of gets in the way, though, doesn't it, when we start doing things like that? Rebekah had planned to fool her husband. She intentionally set about to fool her husband, to take advantage of his being blind, to take advantage of his being broken, to take advantage of his being old. She was going to use all of that against him to get her way. Whatever her way is, just the process of doing it lends itself to evilness. It's interesting to note as well. Isaac was wanting to move forward with this thing in secret. He knew it would cause a consternation. He knew it was going to cause, maybe he thought, hey, you know, if I do this openly, it's going to cause an open rebellion. The folks that are on Esau's side and the folks that are on Jacob's side, they're going to get in a big conflict, and I don't like conflict. Even though by this time Esau, in his wanderings through the woodline, had picked up 2 wives, and they were not very nice wives. Hittite wives, yes. And the Hittite wives, the Bible said, let me see what my note says here. I like the way that it put it. Well, I've lost my notes. Isn't that fun? It vexed the souls of the parents is kind of what it says. That's up there in some of the verses before that. They were not pleased with this marriage. I am weary of my life. It's like, I just don't want to do this anymore. Rebekah was miserable that Esau had brought in these 2 wives. Daddy, Isaac, was miserable that they had brought in these 2 wives. It just vexed them to no end. And part of that, Isaac still being willing to bless him, even after he had brought, if you want to look at it this way, even after he brought shame to the family by marrying the Hittite women, even after he had brought this idolatry into the house of God, if you will, the family, even after that, I'm still going to make Esau, even though he's proven that he can't be trusted to run the place. He likes to go out in the woods and do stuff. He likes to go out and get these wild, crazy women. He likes to come out and just do whatever he wants to do, but I'm still going to make him the boss, even though he's never here, even though he just goes out romping and doing things at his beck and call, every little whim that he has, he's going to go out and hunt. I'm still going to make him the patriarch. Absentee parenting right there, right? Just go on, do whatever you want to do, come back and tell me about it, and I'll be proud of you. Does that sound familiar today? We got so many parents today that want to just say, hey, y'all go on now and do what you want to do. I'll be your buddy, and you can come and tell me about it when you get home. It's not what we were called to do. That's not what Isaac was called to do, but that's what he did. Of course, Rebekah wasn't called to do what she did either, but here we are. So Jacob was not an innocent pawn in a conflict between his mom and daddy either. He could have said, let's not do it like this, Mama. I want you to compare him. Think about it in your mind. His reaction versus how David dealt with Saul versus how Jacob dealt with Esau. Okay? Both of them were appointed by God to be something, but how did they act? Okay? So we're going to look at that even more here as we go. The plan was concocted. The plan was set. Jacob went out. He got a couple of lambs. He let Mama slaughter them, let Mama make them up. Now, this was not a simple thing, okay? This was not a simple thing. And Jacob knew what was at stake. In fact, if you look on in verse 11, he said, Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I'm a smooth man. My father peradventure will feel of me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing. Jacob knew what he was doing, and he was worried about it. He knew what was at stake. If he got caught, not only could he not be blessed, but Father Isaac could say, you are a cursed man. And, Jacob knew this. Now, Rebekah, I don't know how this all came about. I'm sure that this wasn't something that she had just come up with at the last moment. She had thought about it. And there was at least 5 things that she had to do to make this ruse believable to the old blind broken man. She had figured out that, hey, I can cover his skin with goat hair. So the back of his hands, maybe his face, the back of his neck, down his back a little bit. Take some goat hide, put on there. And Abram, man, me and these names today. Isaac would feel of his hand and say, okay, that's a hairy fella. That's a hairy fella. They had to prepare the delicious meal. Okay. She knew that Isaac loved this certain meal, so she would do that, and he would have that. Also, Jacob would have to put on Isaac's garments so that he would smell like a hunter, because a shepherd and a hunter smells 2 different ways. Okay. One smells like a sheep, and one smells like the woods, and they're very different things. So he put on that. He also brought some wine, got Isaac drunk, okay, so that he would at least impair his faculties somewhat. And finally, Jacob had to repeatedly lie to his daddy. Bald-faced, 100% knowingly lying to his daddy. Okay? And he did all of those things. Well, the plan worked. The plan worked. Isaac blessed Jacob. And you know the story. As soon as Jacob and Rebekah beat their hasty retreat, And I'm sure Isaac was sitting back thinking, yes, my plan was a success. Here comes Esau in and says, hey, Dad, here's the stuff that you asked for. Give me my blessing now. Isaac lost it. Esau really lost it. The Bible says he cried out in pain and agony, basically. He was just really, he lost it. So then Rebekah hears that Esau is saying, hey, wait till my daddy dies. As soon as daddy dies, Jacob's dead. I'll kill him. I'll have my birthright. And, you know, I don't know. Jacob might could have put up a fight. He did pretty good against the angel. But, you know, mamas don't want their kids fighting. So here's what happened as a result of all of this. Isaac's marriage and Rebekah's marriage was broken. And there was a trust there that had been betrayed. Okay, that was gone. They didn't split up, they didn't divorce, nothing like that. But the trust was broken. Sometimes we can break people's trust. I tell my kids at school, you know, it's easy to break trust, it's very hard to get it back. Sometimes you can't. What else happened? Jacob ended up leaving. He left and went back to Rebekah's homeland under his uncle Laban. He was there for at least 20 years. And you know, there's nowhere that says in the Bible that Rebekah ever saw him again. Maybe she was still alive when he came back, but the Bible doesn't specify that. She could have lost her most favorite child forever, and did at least for 20 years. Jacob, he lost the trust of his daddy. I can't think of anything that would be harder for a young man than to lose the trust of their father. You know, if my daddy would have ever looked at me and said, boy, I just can't trust you. I mean, I can't think of, I'd rather him be disappointed, you know, and that's saying a lot. But to say, I can't trust you, that's hard to hear. Rebekah, she ended up having a life that no woman would want. In her old age, she had a husband who didn't trust her, who probably lost what little communication they did have. You know, I'm sure he didn't quickly just get over that and say, oh, well, that was yesterday, water under the bridge. It broke the family. And it was later years that Jacob, in exile, after exile and all of this, finally was able to fall into the position that God had planned for him. You know, we can derail ourselves in our where God wants us to be. We can derail that very easily in our youth. We can take paths that take us far away from where God wants us to be, and it's very hard to get it back. Favoritism has no place in society, although it's rampant. Politics, rampant. Society, it's rampant. It has no place in church. And it has no place in our families. Favoritism leads us to think that we know better than God. It leads us to think that we know what's right because we want it our way. And doesn't that actually get back to the thing, well, if I want it, then it must be right, so I must be God? In this whole story, there's no innocent victims. Everybody had plenty of blame to go around, right? Esau forsook the family until he stood to gain from it. Made 2 heathen wives, and those wives made the lives of everybody else miserable in the family. Thought so little of his birthright that he gave it away for food for a day. Jacob, where do you start with Jacob, man? There's so much there. Like I said, I want you to think about the way that David handled Saul and the way Jacob handled his brother. It's just, there's a lot to unpack there, and we can't do that in an hour. Rebekah favoritism, betraying her husband, breaking the trust, irrational thoughts. Isaac, favoritism, abdicated his role as patriarch. He had hard decisions that he had to make. He knew that God had said Isaac should rule, but he just sort of said, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do it in secret so nobody sees it. You know, lack of transparency. It's a model of a dysfunctional family. And we got to do all we can to not fall into these same traps. That took a little longer to unpack than I thought it would. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to add? Yes, sir.
I thought Rebecca received a vision or a dream or something from God telling her the young
Right.
would rule the eldest.
Mm-hmm.
And was she doing what God had told her?
I'm sure that she had that in her mind, but God never told her to be. I don't think that we do God's will by doing things wrong.
Deceiving.
Yeah, I don't think we can deceive somebody so God's will can be done, or that we beat somebody down in the name of God, or that we crush relationships in the name of God.
So once Isaac spoke the blessings, he couldn't pull them back.
He could have, if it was his blessing, he could have probably pulled it back under the false pretense clause. Hey, this was for Esau. You blatantly lied to me, Jacob. You said, I'm Esau. You and Rebekah conspired against me. No court in the land would hold them to that contract. But because God had already said it, and because I think deep down Isaac knew that God had said it, because his wife had told him when he still trusted her, and he knew he couldn't pull it back.
Well, I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am?
I wonder how she made lamb taste like venison, and he didn't know the difference.
Either he had
I defer to the cooks in the crowd.
Either he had no taste buds, or she could prepare it
Right,
to
that's-
taste. Goats taste quite different from lamb.
Mhm.
Absolutely.